Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany and Dr. Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started.
How do you do, friend? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm happy I'm invited back because it finally happened where you couldn't release an episode because of God knows what I said on that. And so we didn't get an episode last week. I'm calling you out on that.
I'm sorry. I didn't have any burning topics in that moment. So,
Yeah.
And it was our first one that we have electively not dropped.
That you have electively
I elected.
Because of whatever I said on there. You were very kind, but you were like, I'm going to wait on this one. I'm like, oh dear. Okay. But since you won't tell me what I said that was inappropriate, I can't change one thing I've done.
Other than we just had to skip a week. And the silence now is deafening. So we gotta come out strong today.
Okay. Well, I'm surprised I'm invited back because you're like, ma'am, you need a break here for a little bit. Okay, so what I was hoping we could talk about today, because it's something we've talked about a few times, and then I think you have other examples as well. My question for you, and in our dialoguing conversation before we hit record here, was insurance and write-offs and angry patients. And it ties back to all the Delta stuff. And then in my particular office, I know I shared the nasty review we got. We had a dad the other day that, verbally assaulted my front desk with, she kind of said, hey, we didn't sign our contract with Delta, so our relationship has changed, blah, blah, blah. The nice way of saying, like, we're done with Delta, right? And so you have all this polished verbiage for us, and she was saying all that. And the dad was like, so because you chose not to sign your contract, I have to pay more? And, to me, I'm just like, you know what? I wish there was an eject button. Just get the F out of here, man. Anyway, leave my front desk alone. And I found it quite offensive and irritating. And I feel like what you're saying, a lot of your clients are dealing with this. And then the other, kind of side arm to it is one thing that we've been talking about with our team that seems to keep coming up is I think our team tends to feel bad and put themselves in our patients' pocketbooks, which I appreciate the empathy. I think at the end of the day, I'm waiting for somebody to be empathetic towards me and my pocketbook. These are the same people that want to help our patients or are like, oh, I can understand why Miss Smith isn't signing on for this $3,000 treatment plan because the economy is so terrible right now and I'm struggling to put food on the table. So I can only imagine this patient and then it's affecting our treatment acceptance. And yet it's the same person that's coming to me asking for me to give them a bonus or a raise. Right. And so I'm like, how does it work that you're working for the patient, but you don't have my back on it? Yeah. Oh, because it affects you. Oh, but your job was to get the patient to accept treatment, but you didn't get that done because you felt bad for the patient. But what about your responsibility to me to help me uphold my business, which is why you're getting paid? Anyway, so again, I tend to take that stuff personally, so you have to talk me off the ledge on that one. Point being, can you help us talk about, because I know you're very passionate too, about this whole bleep, bleep, bleep insurance companies, and we're all fed up. But my question to you is, what can we do about it? And I think you have some good answers for us on that. So
yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the example of the.
Well, and this
gentleman.
way I keep you talking.
Yeah.
So that way I talk less, and then maybe we can drop this episode.
I might have to not drop myself. It's just the day might come where you are like, Bethany, you were way too much to not drop that episode.
I don't think so. But anyway, go ahead. You were saying you're glad I brought up this gentleman.
I'm glad you brought up the gentleman because it is almost a duplicated version of what I've heard maybe 4 times in the last couple of weeks, which is a patient comes in and is angry because insurance short paid on something or there's been some kind of contractual change, and the patient is mad
verbally mad at the dental office or at an employee at the dental office. And so I think you hit the nail on the head with, I think our team feels personal responsibility over that person's anger, which is part of what frustrates me, because one of the things that I'll do when I'm walking with a team through dropping insurance is I'll actually educate the team on just how successful insurance companies are. Because a lot of times I feel like there's a lack of understanding with dental team members. They think, oh, my doctor's making all this money, the practice is doing great, which I'll just throw out some numbers here in a minute, because I think team members assume success with the doctor and with the practice. And therefore they do feel bad in these situations, like, oh, my doctor's doing fine. Like, I wish I could just write off this $52 for this patient. And so then they kind of shift their sympathies towards the patient and not towards the doctor. And in all of this, I sit here and I go, where in the heck is the blame for the insurance company? Why are we not talking more about these, I call them devil, Satan incarnate. I've got lots of little love language things for these companies. But to me, it is an evil empire that has capitalized on this opportunity to really pit patients against their providers. And they've done that remarkably well. But what's interesting is somehow in the middle of all of that, they have also caused the employees in these offices to not even think about insurance and the responsibility that they hold in these scenarios. And so we do find that employees, when they're affronted by a patient, that there's sympathies and that they're trying to solve something. And the go-to is, in order to make this patient happy, why don't I just write this balance off? And I am very passionate about not doing that. Now, there's going to be cases where, whatever, at the end of the day, we have to make an executive decision. But in my mind,
that should not be the go-to.
That should not be the go-to. No. We've got to shift the language back to the source of the problem, which is these insurance companies. So, fun facts, and I know that I've mentioned these to you before, but practice owners, yes, if they're running a good, successful practice, they're keeping their profit margins the way that they need to, which is very hard these days to do. As a matter of fact, pre-pandemic, most profit margins were somewhere between 60 on the lower end and 70% profit margin, meaning if the practice produced $1 million, then they were spending $600,000 to $700,000, somewhere in there. That was kind of the normal range. And now it is more on the 65 to 72, 73%. It's really hard to get back down to that 60th percentile. Well, that's because our costs for the dental practice owners has exponentially grown. It is not going down. There's certain things, like I know I hear from my clients, oh, finally gloves are, back down. But then just about the time that gloves come back down, I've had 3 clients in the last couple weeks that have told me my utility rate is doubling. So I previously paid, $700 a month in utilities. It will go to $1,500 a month. So I'm like, okay, great. We've saved now $20 a box on gloves, but we are totally absorbing that cost now with higher utility. It is a very difficult battle now to stay net profitable in those right margins. So you take that comparison. So we're fighting for every penny, every dollar. We're having to be very diligent with costs and all of that. And you flip the scale and you go, I wonder how these dental insurance companies are doing. Okay, well, let's look at some factors. How successful are the CEOs? Well, those CEOs make anywhere between $6 million and $22 million a year. A year, just the CEO. So those companies are so profitable that they can pay their head honcho $6 to $22 million a year. I can tell you, I work with a lot of practice owners. They don't make money like that. They don't make anywhere close to that. So it's laughable to me that when we have a patient that is upset about their balance, their go-to person is, doctor, you need to write this off. And I'm sitting there going, why are we not holding these insurance companies accountable? So I just said a lot. I'll let you chime in.
Which I understand, I appreciate, I agree. But then I'm still going, but what do I do about it? Because at the end of the day, I think even if I do have an employee that's sitting there going, oh man, I feel bad for Miss Smith, but I also feel bad for Dr. Kuba because I just saw the bills that she paid for whatever. But at the end of the day, I have this patient yelling at me, and if it was me and I just brought my kids, and now last year I didn't pay, everything was covered, or I paid $10 per kid, but now you're telling me I owe $80 per child? Like, what? If I was in that patient's shoes, I don't care who's to blame. At the end of the day, I've got this $240 bill and I cannot pay this. Mm-hmm. And so what am I doing about this? And I can't call the CEO of Delta Dental, but I can call Dr. Kuba. So what am I doing here, right? So I think for me, that's where I'm kind of going, but what do I do with that information, and how do I, and I don't blame the employee for going, yeah, if that was me getting this bill, I too would be upset. Or that dad who's like, well, you didn't sign your contract, why should I pay? I mean, at a certain level, I can kind of understand that, but I think it boils back down to, and I think this is what your point was, and your answer to my question of what do we do about this? It is what it is. I can't go up to the front and say to the patient, well, you should take this up with Delta, right? Like that's not going to work. But what can I do? And I think your point is we can train ourselves and our staff to start having some conversations.
Yeah.
And so if you could.
Yes. So I think we've got to, that is to me the great deficiency here is we've got teams that are put in these hotbed situations. We're expecting them to be successful in those conversations. And what would success look like? It would be the patient is de-escalated, we've collected the full balance, and we've retained the patient. That is hard to do. That is a tall order for our team members to tackle these situations with confidence and with the information that they need. And so to me, our great deficit in this category right now is not equipping our teams for these conversations. We're not equipping them with the knowledge that they need. So first and foremost, I think we've got to have honest conversations with our team members about this. If practice owners that are listening to this, if you haven't had a team member come to you with a conversation like this that has happened, I can guarantee you that they've had the conversations and you just don't know about it. Because this is happening consistently across my dental offices. So first and foremost, I think we've got to carve out time to have some training and equipping for our teams. First and foremost, they need to understand, the team members need to understand the evil empire of insurance. And I don't think the teams that I sit with oftentimes are very surprised when they start actually looking at the facts of how deficit these insurance companies are in taking care of their patients. They're surprised. So even though they're living it and they're breathing it, they're not really putting all the facts together to realize just how awful these insurance companies are. So we do need to get them informed on how profitable the dental insurance companies are, how little they pay out on claims. Some of the rules and the parameters that they've started to rope into contracts for our contracted dentists out there are just borderline illegal. I mean, how can they create some of these rules? It really is an evil empire. And so I think the first step is making sure that our staff understands that business, that insurance business, is a very profitable business. How are they profitable? They are profitable on the fact that they continue to raise rates for their clients, for the patients that we see. Those premiums continue to go up and they continue to pay less and less. What does that create? A really great profit margin for them. What does it also create? Really big balances for patients. It's not fair, but it is what it is. And so we've got to make sure our team understands that before they start to engage in these conversations, because our sympathies should be aroused for these patients, but not because we did anything wrong. Our sympathy should be aroused because this patient is paying for a dental benefit that is subpar at best. And I am frustrated with them over this situation. Now, we did not create that situation. Insurance created that situation. So we can come alongside that patient and our sympathies can be aroused for them, but we are joining with them almost like raising a fist at the insurance company, you big, bad, evil company. Now, was it our charges? Yes. And so we've got to get our team comfortable with the economics of our charges and making sure that they understand why we charge what we charge. Looking at the facts, if you've been typical and you've been doing a 1, 2, or 3% increase year over year, and you compare that against inflation, we are not keeping up with where we should be from a cost standpoint. We should be charging far more than we currently do. What has held us back is insurance companies. We've kept our costs low because of the constraints of insurance companies, and the team needs to understand that. So I think that's kind of step one.
And I think for me, when you said that, I'm like, but what does the team understanding that? How is that going to change anything? And I think it's going to change something, because then if they themselves can say, wait a minute, you're right. This is not, I don't need to feel bad about this.
No.
And I know I and my doctor didn't create this. Mm-hmm. And so I think even just that knowledge, just that alone puts them in a different mindset to help address the situation, so that, yeah, it's not going to make the balance go away. The patient's probably, still not going to be happy. They still owe it. But mentally, if it's the blame is assigned in the right spot, because then I start thinking, do the employees start going, yeah, I don't know why we charge this much,
right?
And it goes back to valuing the service. So then I start thinking, okay, then does the employee themselves go, yeah, if I had to pay $25 for my kid's fluoride, I wouldn't pay that either. Okay, if you don't value a service we give in the office,
yeah,
then that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so I think just the education part of that, so that they know they're not the reason. You are made to feel like you're the reason when this patient's coming at you, but just being equipped with that.
Yep. Because these are emotional conversations. The patient is coming at our team with strong emotion. Emotion normally meets emotion, right? So in these situations that our teams are being affronted with, it is emotional for them as well. And so what we have to do with this knowledge, we're equipping them to have emotion. We don't want sterile, emotionless people dealing with these conversations, because they are hard and they're frustrating. The patient is frustrated. We should be frustrated with them. So we want our empathetic staff to be able to have emotions in these conversations. But what we want is those emotions to be ascribed properly. So all they know is, I feel bad for this situation, and what is my power to change it? Well, write off, or maybe talk to the doctor about making some payment arrangements here. Or so they go to what they can solve. And again, we will need to get there at some point, but the initial reaction from our staff, we really want that emotional reaction to be, here we go again, they've screwed somebody else. Dang it, stupid insurance. Right? So those emotions should be aroused, but it should be frustration that we've got yet another patient that has been screwed by their insurance company, not we're somehow responsible for this. And so the emotional component to this is really important, and we can't properly align our staff's emotions without having those conversations.
So then for the nuts and bolts of it, like, then you said, carve out some time and train our team. How? Yeah. Like, again, I'm lucky I've got you. So for the people that don't have you, how do you suggest getting started on these conversations, or what?
So I think the whole team, by the way, needs to know this information. Even if you've got a very segregated staff where administrative team only deals with administrative, and even if there's a financial question brought up clinically, nobody's going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, doesn't matter. Your whole team needs to have an understanding and an awareness of what's going on with the insurance world, because it has come to a point where patients will make comments to clinical team members. And what we don't want is our clinical team members going, oh, I don't know anything about that, right? No, it needs to look and be that we are all on the same page and we are all passionate about this insurance company failure, so that when somebody brings something up to your clinical team member about how expensive this dental appointment can get, your team member can engage briefly in that conversation and go, I know it is frustrating that insurance has somehow made these appointments so much more costly for patients. It's really infuriating to us because we're providing the same services that we always have. We're charging pretty much the same thing we always have, and somehow your bill continues to go up. That makes me so mad at your insurance company. So we need to have a team that's confident in having those brief interactions.
I think even something you said to me previously was, and I never thought about it that way. I mean, it's a pretty obvious thing, but when you were saying that, yeah, you're right. Like we've always billed out, I don't know, $40 for an exam, $40 for a cleaning. Maybe it's 42 now. Maybe the fluoride went from 19 to 22, like something like that. And maybe the patient never had a bill. And now those same things that we're billing out for a couple of dollars here and there, and now the patient has a $42 bill.
Yeah.
And if the staff is thinking like we raised our fluoride fee from 20 to 30 or 40, we didn't. And so I think getting examples for them to see, like it really is we didn't charge any more. It's the insurance is paying much less. So again, I think for employees that need that visual, because they can hear us saying all this, but then if they're like, I don't know, but I think if they see that visual and then they're able to talk to a parent better about it and say, so I guess that might be one thing that docs, if y'all have any EOBs that you go back and look at and say, where did this patient, like they've always had Guardian, we've always done this with Guardian, like if you're still in network with them, why are you having to pay more? Oh, we didn't raise it. You know what I mean? So I think just getting some examples might be good.
Those example EOBs, and there's plenty of them now, where they have creatively found a way to not pay for something. I'm seeing this a lot with x-rays, where we had our traditional, 2 or 4 bite wings, whatever we did at our recall appointments, and all of a sudden now that deductible applies to x-rays, and it never applied before. So all the patient knows is, I used to pay nothing, and now all of a sudden I owe $52 for this appointment.
What did you do?
What are you charged something different? And the facts are, we could take the EOB from 6 months before and the EOB from today's appointment, and we could see it's the exact same charges. The only difference is a deductible applied. How about that? Insurance decided to quit paying 100% for preventative because x-rays are preventative. But all of a sudden they changed them to basic coverage, 80% coverage. So now you get your deductible and the 80%. So it's frustrating. Same appointment, we've charged the same. Insurance has changed the rules on you. So bringing out those example EOBs and letting your team see the trends of that is actually very helpful for them to have a full understanding. The other thing is also, in addition to them seeing the facts of the EOBs, understanding the nuances of what's happening with insurance and how evil they are, they do need to be equipped with actual verbiage. And again, this is the full team. So when I say full team, this is a doctor scheduling time, whether that's your normal staff meeting, if you've got a normal monthly staff meeting and you're replacing your agenda with this training, whether that's scheduling an additional time, but the full team comes together for one purpose, which is understanding the nuances of insurance. And again, starting with the facts about big business insurance and how successful they are.
So how would we find that information?
It's very searchable. So anytime, I'm constantly looking up, before I go into a team that's dealing with some insurance stuff, I'm constantly looking up new facts on, what is this year's CEO of MetLife making, right? I can search it every year. So all of this is very easily searchable.
Okay.
I think the key facts are going to be the things that are most shocking when I share is how much the CEOs are getting paid. But even if you wanted to take it a step further, look at the other executive positions. it's not just the CEO that's banking. It is the VP of marketing is, I can't even remember the last number I looked at. Like, it's insane how successful these insurance companies are. So you can pull those kind of facts. You can also look up, I wish I could remember the name of this article. I read it probably a year ago, and they did a deep dive on medical insurances are held to some standards where they have to pay out a certain amount of the premiums that they receive in. So it's kind of an accountability measure to ensure that medical insurance companies are paying out the premiums. But dental is not held to those same standards.
But I know it just passed in Massachusetts, this year, last year?
Yeah.
And I can't remember the insurance company, and I can't remember exactly what, but hopefully that trend picks up around the country where...
I think it will. Yeah. I think it will. I really do. So we can look into articles like that. There's a lot of, practice owners can look at some of the lawsuits that have been brought against Delta in the last year or two. I think there's two or three that are actually against Delta right now. So looking into those, what are they being sued for and why are they being sued? All that information I think is going to be really helpful. So first you kind of take a look at insurance and how awful they are. And then I think the second component is some actual data, EOBs. Even if you have raised your fees, most of the time that's a 1 to 3% increase is what I'm seeing. So if you're, pro fee was $100 before, it might be 101 or 102 now, so that your team can see, like, how much did milk increase? Right? So last year, what were you paying for a gallon of milk? And so hey, your gallon of milk went from $3 to $4 within the matter of a year. That's a 25% increase. We did a 2% raise, right? So you can kind of do some of those comparisons to make sure that your team understands the purpose behind what you're charging. I will say that is what I am sometimes surprised by with teams, is that when they look at the cost, they're like, that's a lot. I think we need to address that head on, because it's not a lot. And the best way to kind of compare that is to compare it against medical expenses. So we look at, oh my gosh, it was, $212 for this person's dental cleaning. Great. Let's look at the facts of that. That was a 1-hour appointment. They received a pro fee. They received 4 bite wings. They received 2 PAs. They received an exam by the doctor. That whole 1-hour appointment was $212. Now you take that $212 and you add it to any specialist. Oh, I had to go see my GI specialist. Great. Let's look at the facts of that. How long were you at that GI? Oh, that was a 15-minute appointment. Okay. And how much did that GI doctor charge you? $312 for 15 minutes?
Where they did nothing. Like, in terms
nothing
of...
was done.
Yeah.
They talked to you, poked around on your belly. No exam, no x-ray was done, no scope was done. It was just 15 minutes with the doctor, and that was $312. When you compare the cost to medical, we are very affordable. And sometimes the team, because they're only in their bubble, they just know what we charge, and it feels like a lot to them. So we may have to spend some time. If you've got a team that feels like things are expensive, you may have to actually look at some of those value conversations.
Yeah, and that goes back to that value where we had to have with our treatment coordinator, who has these amazing conversations. I mean, she builds like amazing rapport, and yet we're still struggling with closing of the cases and getting them on the books.
Yeah.
And so I think, we have had some frustration between the leadership team and our front desk team, where they're like, what else do you want us to do?
Yeah.
Like, we're spending the time, we're explaining it properly. The patient loves the time we spent and all of that. Why are you still nagging on us? And I'm like, well, I appreciate all that, and I do acknowledge all of that. But at the end of the day, if I'm looking at black and white and we're still not closing these cases, that still means it was ineffective. And I can see how that's inflammatory and how that would build up their defenses. What do you mean I'm ineffective at my job? This patient's loving me. I mean, you're right, but from a business perspective, from what we like to do as dentists and why we got into it, we want to help people.
Right. And
so I'm having these conversations to help them understand and help them, we're doing phenomenal at that. But at the end, if we're not actually getting the treatment accomplished, then how are we helping that patient?
Right.
Like, we're not.
We failed in that regard.
Right. And from a business standpoint, like, great, you spent 45 minutes with that patient and they're, they get it in theory, but they're still not committing. So that is kind of a fail. And I hate saying that to you that way, because I know it hurts your feelings. You feel like I'm, saying that you're ineffective at your job. And I don't mean to say it that way, but from a black and white standpoint, that is what it is. And then the comment I hear back consistently from a lot of my team members is, well, but everything in the economy has gone up. Like, nobody can afford this. So it's the time, of the state that we're in. And so I think, to me, that's where I think what's happening is we automatically are looking at that estimate going, oh God, like, I couldn't pay this right now. Mm-hmm. And my question to them is, okay, if this was your child, or I guess like in a general office or an endo office or wherever, like, if this is your family member that needs this work, so do you not believe this work is needed? You don't think that Mrs. Smith needs tooth number 30,
right?
Basically. Like, you think she's got, 22 other teeth she can chew with because she's lost the others and she's figured it out. She'll figure it out without 30. Is that what we're saying here? Like, you don't think she needs the crown? So I guess that, that's part of the conversation. Are you at an office where you feel like the work is not necessary? No. I think the majority of us are planning to help our patient. We want them to have a full complement of teeth and ones that work. So if we believe that they need 30, but we don't believe that it's worth spending on, like, I don't, like, do you need that gallon of milk?
Right.
Do you? Like, why can't you just drink tap water?
Yeah.
Why don't you take a supplement? You know what I mean? So, like, I think it's just, we're not valuing what we have. And I think the pushback I keep getting is, but
yeah.
And my pushback is, okay, you yourself don't believe this. So if this was your kid, you would not invest in this for your kid, which is a problem then, because you don't value our services. You don't value my opinion and what this kid needs.
And I do think that comes after conversation after conversation after conversation that our team members have had, where the patient is saying, oh, I can't afford this. And over time, it's like a dripping faucet. Like, eventually that starts to seep in, and we start to change our mindset to go, oh, this is unaffordable. This is that they've got to choose to spend their money elsewhere rather than here. And so it may actually require kind of that recalibration to go, let's actually play out worst case scenario. Let's just go with this for a minute. Let's look at this little kiddo. Let's look at his case. Let's look at his teeth. Let's play out, if mom and dad continue to do nothing, let's play out all the scenarios that can happen for this kid. Because we don't allow ourselves to think about the importance of dentistry near enough, because we're focusing on the nuts and bolts of it and the financial component of it and having a happy experience for that. It's just complex. I totally get that. But we don't spend enough time going, let's trace it out. I do this all the time with when I'm sitting in a general practice and we're looking at patients and I see all these missing teeth and no clinical notes regarding the discussion of that missing tooth. And I ask people all the time, I'm like, well, why haven't we talked about the missing tooth? Well, I mean, they're fine with it. Oh, I know that they, in their non-dental mind, are fine with it. But what do we know in the dental field about missing teeth? What are the consequences? Let's play out the domino effects of this missing tooth and what it can do for this particular person. And then when we start to walk down that path, it's like, oh, yes. It's like all of a sudden we remember that there are consequences to missing teeth. Just like there's consequences to decay that sits there. There are consequences. And so it may mean that we need to recalibrate our team to recognize dentistry is not elective. Like, we have got to quit looking at it like it's elective. It is absolutely essential to the health of a person in a million different ways. And if we ourselves do not believe that enough, and if we're not passionate about it, why would the patient be passionate about it? So it may require that in this team meeting as well.
Well, we had one not too long ago that this mom, like, the kid, they finally have reached the point where the kid's not sleeping at night. They know the work needs to be done. I can't afford it. Don't qualify for care credit. The same scenario we're all dealing with, a million times a day in our offices. And I guess, I was like, fine, we could do this payment plan, or we could just take this, like normally we take full payment before we would schedule. Maybe we just take whatever. And, so I'm part of the problem too at that point, because I'm looking at this kid's mouth and I'm like, oh my God, she needs treatment like 2 weeks ago. And I felt really bad for her. She was the sweetest little kid. And, and so my treatment coordinator that, she's like, yeah, the mom, I offered her this, I offered her that, I still don't think. And my previous treatment coordinator kind of, who she jumps into a lot of conversations, she comes in and she's like, oh, heck no. I guess the mom told the treatment coordinator, oh, but, my mortgage, blah, blah, blah. And this other team member comes in and she's like, nobody's going to kick you out of your house if you don't pay your mortgage on time for the first month, 2 months, 3 months. That's nonsense. Like, the mom can just be late on her payments for a month or two, pay us, and then figure that part out. So she has the money if she wanted it. And I was just like, oh my God. So people can think outside the box when you have to. Yeah. And so for the treatment coordinator, that was kind of like, well, and I had to ask her, I said, if this was your son's mouth, because your son's the same age, would you let this just sit there? Now, he's not sleeping every night. What are you going to do about it?
Right.
I know you don't have the $3,000, but what are you going to do about it? And she just looked at me. I'm like, that's how I need you to think about this. Your kid, it's your kid that's hurting now. Your kid that's about to end up in the hospital.
Yeah.
What are you doing about it to make that happen? And that's the motivation I need you to have to help these families, because they don't see the grenade coming, that they're about to step on this landmine, but we should see it, and we should help guide them to avoid that. And if you're kind of like, well, I mean, I don't know.
Right. Then who's advocating? Who's advocating for the child, for the patient? We are the advocate. And we can't be I always use the example of personal trainers, because I feel like a personal trainer is seen as this elective health person, right? And that we pay for. But what if we showed up to our personal trainer and they were like, yeah, I'd really like for you to do, 50 crunches today, but whatever you feel like. Oh, I feel like 10 today. Great. Let's do 10 then. And then I'd really like for you to, run for 10 minutes on the treadmill, but whatever. Can I do 2? Sure. Yeah, you can do 2. What's going to happen over time is we don't get the results that we're looking for. And that trainer has failed because he or she has not advocated and pushed us towards optimum health. And sometimes in the dental field, as soon as the patient mentions, well, I don't know that I can afford that, we're like, oh, back away. They said money. We can't do anything about it. I'm like, no, that's exactly when we should be pushing in to go, no, we're going to get you healthy and we're going to help you figure this out. Let's talk about specifically how can I make this affordable for you? And so we've really got to get our team on board with passionately advocating for our patients. So I would say step 1 is look at insurance. Make sure your team is aware of just the evil empire that it is. Step 2, look at the facts. Look at your fees, compare that to medical fees, look at EOBs and how creative insurances become to get out of paying for preventative things or regular, treatment items. Then I would say we may need to have a recalibration on we are the advocate for these patients. Let's play out worst case scenario, even with something simple. Let's play out worst case scenario. Your patient has one deep perio pocket due to a faulty crown. Let's play that out. What could the consequences of that be? Even the little things that seem small, there is a consequence. If you fast forward 2, 3, 5, 10 years, there's a consequence, and your team may need to be reminded of what that consequence is. And then I would say the final component in this training or over multiple trainings would be getting actual verbiage down. working with your team so that they've got a default response, because some of this will come electronically, like an email from a frustrated patient or a text message exchange. That's certainly going to happen. But a lot of this is going to happen face to face, where patients are mad enough to say something directly to you or to your staff members, and they need to be equipped with like a default response, almost like I was reading about these shark attacks that have happened, and this nurse with the one in Florida, the 15-year-old girl that got her arm and her leg bit off, this nurse said it was like she just moved into like trance mode, and she went towards the emergency, and she just innately started doing what she knew needed to be done in order to save this girl's life. And it's almost like we've got to get ourselves so comfortable with the language and the verbiage that we plan to use with our team that as soon as it comes up, it's just like, whoop, we switch into this mode of, I know this so well that I can engage in this conversation confidently with the right words and in a way that hits those three results of de-escalation, getting the money out of the patient, and then also keeping them as a patient. So a lot of time should be spent on the verbiage side of it.
So that's a great stopping point. I'm going to add this so that you can edit it if you don't like it, but that way we don't lose the whole episode, because I behaved this one. But so you just mentioned some of those things, and my comment always is like, okay, equip our team with verbiage, but who's helping me do that? Because I stink at verbiage, so nobody wants my verbiage. And so you mentioned, and I'm super excited about this, and I hope you don't mind that I'm sharing it, but if you don't like it, then you will edit. Okay. You were mentioning starting August in the fall, you're going to be launching a subscription.
Yes.
And in that, whoever subscribes to, you'll launch, like, whatever. Whoever subscribes, then you will have some resources. So
yes.
you would have, like, for example, for this episode, you would have some verbiage options.
Yeah.
I would love if you would have, like, maybe some EOBs to show us, like, what we're looking at. Or you, when we started talking about this right before, and I stopped you, I was like, I just hit record, let's talk about it on this podcast. But you were, very impassioned about insurance and all this. I'm like, could you record this so we could all, like, have this and put it in our offices? And so you might record that. So if you are a subscribing member, you would have access to some of these additional tools and help resources. And I'm super excited.
Even little blips for your team meetings that if you were to put together a training and you're like, oh, how did she say this? You'll even have, an audio version that you can just be like, okay, listen to these few minutes of Bethany talking about this, and then we'll dialogue, or Dr. Kuba talking about this. So anyway, it's going to be finally, I think we're at a point where we can put together some good resources for our subscribers. So I'm excited about that.
I am too. I'm super excited.
Well, thanks for chatting with me today. I appreciate it.
We'll see if you launch this one or not.
It's going out.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.